Sun's Mirror, we all know what it's like to play, you know, Bear Wars. Those are all pretty common. If you know you insist on playing Bear Wars, I'll just go ahead and throw out a couple pieces of information with regards to that, as long as I'm talking about Night Elf Mirror. With Bear Wars, a few things that might make the difference are upgrades. Don't forget about upgrades. Having 2 staffs as opposed to 1. Having a Keeper of the Grove at higher levels. Entangle is often very strong when you can keep Dryads out of play. And Thorn's Aura can often make a difference as well. And then good use of Wisps can also be surprisingly advantageous in Bear Mirror. A lot of times people don't think to use Wisps, but just like Human pulls out their Militia for important fights, and Orc pulls out their Peons for important fights and all that kind of stuff. Even in Night Elf Mirror, even though there aren't water elementals and stuff like that to dispel, you should also be remembering to use your Wisps. It's always going to be helpful. A lot of times it can prevent some rejuvenations or lower your opponent's mana. Lower your opponent's hero's mana, and end up giving you an advantage if the fight is close. But back on the topic at hand, you'll notice both players, as usual, go for their Ancient of War creeping. One thing that I will mention real quick is that on this particular map, a lot of people in Night Elf Mirror choose to send out an early Wisp to their opponent's corner to catch their opponent Ancient of War creeping. If you send out one of your, first 5 Wisps to your opponent's corner and you see your opponent's Ancient of War building, a lot of times you can drag the creeps onto that Ancient of War and have it cancelled. It's a fun little trick. And worst case scenario, all you've done is lose just a little bit of resources because you send out that early Wisp. The reason why you don't see that in very many high-level replays is because when you're playing against a professional player, a lot of times it's kind of a waste. If you place your Ancient of War correctly and you know how to use your Wisps effectively, you know how to use your Wisps effectively, then you shouldn't be susceptible to that particular trick. If you place your Ancient of War a little bit far back, if your opponent tries to run in and pull the creeps onto you, you can use a Wisp of your own to pull the creeps off of you again. And if your Ancient of War is far enough back, then you will be totally fine. And then your opponent will have wasted a Wisp and some resources. So that's probably why you don't see it. But yeah, the same basic topics in Ancient of War creeping. And if you notice the way that Creo's creeping right now, he uses his archers to actually pull out the creeps a little bit before he does his creeping. It might seem silly, but when it comes to playing mirror matches, you have to be thinking about tiny little things like this. One of the topics I was covering in that last match just now was Moon establishing little advantages, and one of the way you establish little advantages was by creeping better than your opponent. By better, I mean not taking as much damage, and by doing it faster. And you'll notice both players also using their Scout Wisps, as knowledge is also a way to establish advantages in Mirror, as you can use knowledge to creep jack and expand and do all sorts of stuff. Use scouting knowledge is what I mean by knowledge. So if you take a quick status of both players right now, they craft at pretty near the same speeds. They both have a Demon Hunter and 5 or 6 archers. I believe Moon only has 5 right now, and Creo has 6, and a 7th coming out for Creo. And Creo has slightly more Moon juice than Moon does. So this stuff might seem minor, but just little things that matter. One of the things with archer production is that when you do that Ancient of War creeping, you want to set it down as quickly as you can without slowing down your creeping or making yourself take too much damage, and that way you can get your archers out quicker. Another little thing to keep in mind. And then if you're going to be playing aggressively like this, just for added fun, you can see what Creo has done here on the bottom right-hand corner of the map, which is something that you can do on Terran Stand, which is you buy yourself your opponent's sapper as part of this little tier 2 push and trying to establish an advantage. So you'll notice here that Moon has focused down Creo's Naga, which is which died, which obviously isn't optimal. But if you look at what's happening, while that Naga died, Creo was able to do a lot of damage to Moon's Demon Hunter, and thus use pretty much all of Moon's Moon Juice, and in the process, put Moon at a pretty severe disadvantage. If you look at Moon's army right now, he only has 3 archers and 2 pretty hurt heroes, no Moon Juice. Creo back at home has full Moon Juice. He has a full health Demon Hunter right now that's still swinging. Even if he ends up having to TP away from this fight, he's going to be in a very, very strong position. So basically the idea is that when you creep, really aggressively early, get your archers out really early, and you run in right at tier 2 for this tier 2 push. This is just another way to play this Demon Hunter Archer game. So the idea is on Terranus Sand, you can instead of running all the way across this huge map to your opponent's base, and when your opponent's definitely going to be creeping close by, you don't want to run in and go after wisps the way that it's more advantageous to do on Terranus Sand. Instead you try to creep better than your opponent, try to make more archers than your opponent, and then when you run at them at tier 2, it doesn't matter if you end up having to TP away like Creo just did. If you force your opponent to lose some units and use all of his Moon Juice, you can then use the Moon Juice that you've been saving up and run straight back, especially when you've added some fun stuff like Shredders and you're bringing wisps now and all that kind of stuff, and just win the game right there. And if your opponent is going archers and Talon, there isn't as much of a time pressure. You've now established a big advantage, and your opponent's making the same units as you are. You can sit back and secure the win by creeping more, getting more items like Moon did in the last game on Twisted Meadows, maybe expanding if you want to. But if your opponent is going bears, then you have sort of a double-edged sword. On the one edge, that tier 2 fight is a little bit easier because he had a slower second hero, probably fewer archers, spent some resources building his lores and his Hunter's Hall. And by the way, canceling lores is another fun thing you can do as part of that tier 2 push. But on the other side, if you have to make sure that if you're just gonna stick with archers and not go for tier 3 Talon to counter the bears, then you want to run straight back and end the game before he has too many bears. And you can either add in Talon, a little bit of Talon to make sure that you secure the win, or you can just stick with pure archers and your Shredder in this case, and throw down some Ancients of War to add a little bit of tanking factor. But either way, after you've drained all your opponent's Moon Juice, you want to run straight back so he doesn't have time to make his bears and get full use of his rejuvenation. And you lay down your Ancients of War immediately, so you have some tanks to help you in with the fight. And adding Shredders also helps you add some tanks. And meanwhile, you're just producing as many archers as you can. You'll notice that Creo's also bought a Zeppelin, which is just a micro aid in this kind of a fight. And you'll notice that Creo has also brought in extra wisps, which he's going to use to dispel the rejuvenation and drain his opponent's mana. You'll notice that Creo has taken down most of Moon's wells, and so Moon actually can't make any more bears right now. He only has that one bear, and Creo was able to use that wisp to dispel the rejuvenation. And now, even though Moon was able to get Master Training, due to Creo's timing and aggressiveness, he only has one bear, no rejuvenation, and no way to really threaten Creo. If Creo wanted to, he could just pull back behind his Ancients here, but there's really no need. All he needs to do is focus on the hero, and the game's over. So that's another good example of a different version of the aggressive Demon Hunter Archer play, where with Terranus Sand it's more advantage to creep early and establish an Archer advantage, to push that advantage at tier 2 to establish a Moonwell advantage, and then once you drain your opponent's Moonwells to come back and secure the win. And this is specifically for Terranus Sand and for playing against bears, although the same concepts can probably apply as well in other maps, and you guys can figure out how to do that. So, that about wraps it up for this commentary. I've talked about a lot of stuff with Mirror, and I'm sure I'll come back to Mirror for more sometime in the near future. Hopefully you guys have found this educational, and I will see you next time. This is Balance from WCReplays.com. See you later.